Hi, and welcome to Second Rate Film School. I'm Andrew.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Eduardo Sánchez.
Yeah, we don't have Jacob here today. He's got a conflict, but I guess if we're going to have to replace him with anyone, we might as well replace him with the director of the Blair Witch Project.
I'll
So,
do my
yeah.
best, man. I'll do my best.
So, yes, welcome. We're doing 1999's The Blair Witch Project, and it's very cool. We have the co director, Eduardo Sanchez, here with us today. So, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is gonna be fun.
Thank you. Yeah, you obviously did a commentary track in '99 for when the DVD initially came out, but figure it might be interesting to now talk 20 plus years on and where the film has gone since then.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's kind of a weird, I'm amazed that, it's still so popular and people still want to talk about it and stuff. It really is it's I never thought that I would have a film in my career that would be, that would still be talked about 20 years later. So I appreciate the interest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course. I think it was one of the defining horror movies of the '90s, along with Scream. I think it really breathed a new life into the genre.
Yeah, it was right before Sixth Sense,
Yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
that's and that summer really, and horror before that. I mean, I've always been a horror fan, but
same.
it wasn't quite. I think the scariness had kind of left the horror genre for a while there, and we luckily were part of bringing it back.
Yeah, well, and I mean, the thing is, I read an interview where they mentioned Stephen King says, the reason why the movie's so scary is it feels real. Like, he's like, everything about this movie, and that, we'll get into that, how many people believe the movie is real. Unlike most other found footage movies, this one, feels like this, I mean, it was actually being shot by the actors. It doesn't feel like there was a ton of like, okay, we have to like plan, this is going to be, how's this, I mean, obviously the camera's shaking right now, it feels natural.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was our main thing because this was when we did the movie, it was the first time at least in our minds, it was the first time that it had been done. Years later, well, a few years later, we found out that we were introduced to Cannibal Holocaust, and we realized that that was the exact same premise as our film. Only in 1979, but Dan and I had never seen that movie, so we were as shocked as anybody else when we actually watched it. And we were like, "Holy crap!" So, for us, this is the first time that somebody was doing something like this, was having the idea of like finding footage and then doing a documentary about these people basically lost in the woods and dying. Um, so it was really important for us for everything to be real. Like, we didn't want any extra lighting. We didn't want anything to give away that it was that it was a movie, that it was a movie being shot by filmmakers and actors and stuff. And so every step of the way, from the writing to the casting to the locations, casting the supporting characters, it was all about like finding people that felt real and felt kind of awkward in front of the camera if we needed to be them to be. But everything was, this was supposed to be 1994, so everything was played as real, everything. So that's kind of the prime objective of of the film when we first started, is just let's not give it, obviously people are going to find out this is not a real occurrence, obviously, but in the movie itself we didn't want to give anything away that gave it like, okay, this is obviously a movie because they've hired this person or they have this or whatever. So that was the main important thing for us.
Yeah, well, and that's again, it goes on to like how effective it is that so many people believe the movie was real. I mean, I watched this movie a couple years ago with my roommate and his girlfriend, and when the credits came on, she's like, "Wait, it was fake!" Like, she genuinely still believed the movie was real. So you did a
Yeah.
pretty damn good job there. Um,
Well, thank you. Yeah, we did it. I think we did a good job.
yeah. Now, the first question I have here is, I noticed when I was listening to the commentary, you guys were still kind of implying the myth, at least, of the Blair Witch was real. You mentioned when Susie and Ingrid are on screen, like, oh, this woman just came up and she was riffing off them really well. She wasn't planted, and there's like several implications that that the myth is still real. So, and then a lot of the, I know the Oni comic books that came out shortly after the movies portrayed it as you guys going in the woods was fake, but the legend of the Blair Witch was real. So, when was the decision that you guys would be like, okay, we even made that part up as well?
I think, it was kind of, I mean, I don't think we ever expressly told people that it was real, but we just didn't tell them it wasn't real, even though the
Yeah.
movie, we never like told people that the movie was real. At least, Dan and me never, we never did an interview saying, "Oh no, this is real footage," and we never crossed that line. But I think the myth was kind of fun to play with, and I think that was kind of part of the magic of it. Like Curse of the Blair Witch, there was a documentary that came out right before the movie was released, and I think that was another major factor as far as why people believed that it was real, because it was like this, truly very realistic looking documentary about the footage and about the myth. Um, and even now, like there's still people, you kind of start, almost like believing that it is real. I mean, people really do want to believe that this thing really happened. So I think early on we kind of let people, we kind of led people on a little bit as far as like the Blair Witch, myth being real, but we never really, never took it completely seriously and like never said, no, no, this is absolutely real. We kind of just, played around and kind of pushed people. If people thought it was real, we didn't want to, ruin that. But I mean, yeah, and it's funny because, a lot of people are, even to this day, probably there's some people who probably believe that the legend is real and the movie is not real. Obviously, it was just,
Yeah.
reenactment. But because there's still like people looking for was there any factual evidence to to ground our idea of the Blair Witch mythology, and there really wasn't anything. We took it from all these other things that we saw and we had read around us. But it was just a kind of a fun thing to do, to pretend that the Blair Witch actually existed.
Actually, that
Yeah.
kind of goes into my question of the development process with the script. And I know it wasn't a traditional script. I think it was like I read like a 35-page document or something like that. But would you care to shed light on just that development process?
Yeah, it was like, Dan and I came up with the idea in like 1991, and then it was basically, a filmmaking crew goes into the woods and disappears, and then many years later, like our original idea was like they disappeared in the 70s, and all we found was film reels. But we were in film school, and it was the first time we were working with 16 millimeters, so we were like really enamored by film, real film. Um, so it was still called the Woods movie at that point, and then Dan and I went on and did some other things. We graduated from school. I did a feature. We did a feature together, and then and so the idea for Blair Witch kind of continued to develop, but not very not very much. It was every once in a while we'd be like, hey, what about this and this, whatever. And then it wasn't until 1996 when we came back and said, all right, let's make this movie. Finally, we named it Blair Witch, and that's when we really started to kind of um, you know tune into all the beats and all the story conflicts and all the stuff that that goes into a kind of a regular film, a regular script. But we knew the movie was going to be improvised. Like we felt that there's no way we're going to be able to write this dialogue out. It has to feel like it's just coming. It has to feel completely real. So we didn't think that writing the dialogue was going to be was going to be a good idea. So Dan and I just basically did this outline. It was a script basically without any dialogue, and and we just kept honing it, kind of honing it down and kind of really breaking out the beats. And then once we got to Maryland, we started we started scouting locations. We found the woods, and then kind of nailing down where everything was going to happen. Like, here's where the Stickman Forest is going to be. Here's the first night of camping, kind of laying all that out. But the story had already, at that point, I think had already pretty much been laid out. So we were just kind of following the blueprint and kind of breaking it down, trying to figure out how we were going to shoot all this stuff without, with little to no contact with the actors.
Mm-hmm.
But the story really kind of, the script itself developed just from like the idea of like, okay, this film crew goes missing in the 70s and whatever, and then they find their footage and we do a documentary about it. And and then really quickly, once Greg Hale, our producer, got involved, he was like, we realized that doing a movie, getting footage from the 70s was not going to be easy. It was not going to be cheap. So, and also, we weren't going to be able to afford that much film, so he was the one that suggested, well, why don't we shoot it on video, kind of a behind the scenes? And we're like, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. And then that's how the kind of the film that Heather's shooting, which is black and white, and then the behind the scenes, that's most of the film, the stuff you're seeing now. Like, here's a good example. Like right here, they have the film is playing. That's a 60 millimeter footage, and then Heather's shooting back with the video. So we really love that. But you have to remember that, like, when we were writing this part of the movie, we weren't actually writing the movie. We were writing just a section of it, because we were going to go back. The plan was always to, like, shoot this with Mike, Heather, and Josh, and then go back and do a real documentary about it. Like, here's the footage, here's they go into the woods, and then talking to the parents, kind of a mix between, Blair Witch Project and Curse of the Blair Witch. That was really what the original idea was. And then really, as we edited, is really where a lot of the development, the story development came, as far as, like, reworking the initial idea of the movie, which turned it from a conventional documentary examining this footage to just the footage. Because this had never really been done before. You know what I mean? So we were kind of just making the rules up as we went. So yeah, I mean, I think that's so the movie really came to life in the editing room when Dan and I kind of got in there, and we shot a bunch of documentary stuff. We tried to stick it in, and we worked a couple of months trying to figure it out, and it didn't really work. So we just ended up throwing it all away right before Sundance and going with a cut very similar to what you're seeing here.
And obviously, I think that also played into, like you said, making people think, wait, is this real? Because now you're seeing a separate documentary on sci-fi, and I know they've, do documentaries and behind the scenes stuff to promote movies.
Yeah,
But I mean,
that
that's
makes it incredible because it's different sources. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's back when sci-fi would, like, air, not just the TV movie, the silent movie of the week. They had old reruns, I think, of In Search of still at the time and all that. So it felt credible.
It was a different channel for sure.
Yeah. So with this scene here that we're dealing with now, the two fishermen, this is the last time we're going to see any other people other than the three actors, and we didn't really get to touch on it, but, like, all the people you got, between the old man talking about Rustin Parr, the younger guy, Susie and Ingrid, and then all the other people, like, these were all, like, very well chosen people. You really get the idea of, like, middle America. Like, they all feel real. It's not like in Blair Witch 2, Book of Shadows, when they're interviewing the townspeople, a few of them feel real, but, like, a lot of them feel like they came from central casting. So this, really added to the quality. It's like you said in the commentary, those two guys are supposed to be father-in-law and son-in-law. You feel like there is a bickering relationship, that he's been married to his daughter for, like, 30 years, and they don't really like each other, but fishing is the one thing they can get along with.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it was just like a lot of just was luck. Most of the people that they interview were cast by us, but mostly it was just like those two fishermen, Bob Griffin, who's the older fisherman, he was cast just, we had somebody that was helping us with local casting, and he just looked right, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And then the other guy was a guy, Ed Swanson, who I used to play softball with, really nice guy, and I was like, man, this guy would be cool in this part, so that was the first time they literally met each other like half an hour before that scene, and we wrote them two different kind of bios, to kind of what they're supposed to talk about, their point of view, and they just played it perfectly, you know what I mean? And pretty much everybody played it perfectly. I mean, there was one person that we hired to be in the movie that didn't work out. It just didn't. the scene didn't work out, and she was kind of a little too nervous, being a little too obvious. But luckily, we had all this other material. And then Heather, the Ingrid moment and Susie movie moment was basically, that was just completely luck. Heather was going, they were going around interviewing people, and according to Susie, she saw them and nobody wanted to get interviewed by them, and they were kind of, everybody was kind of, it's a small town. This is like in, I think, Brunswick in Maryland, which is still like, I live like half an hour from where we shot all this stuff. So it's like a local little town, and I think people just didn't want to be interviewed. And then Susie was there, and she's like, oh, I'll be interviewed. So she kind of played along, and she was just making it up. She had never heard of the Blair Witch, or and then we have this, we got this incredible moment with, Ingrid trying to, shut her mom's mouth. I mean, you can't direct those kinds of things. So, really that Blair Witch is filled with those moments where, like, the planets aligned and just everything kind of came together and worked out for the betterment of the film.
Now, what was it like co-directing with Daniel Myrick? I imagine it must have been easier in a situation like this with a lower budget, but just would you care to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, Dan and I have been friends since film school. We met at University of Central Florida, and we actually made another film together at the end of our, I guess, our second year in film school, like our thesis film. And we made, we wrote it and directed it together, and it was a really good collaboration. And we really knew each other. We had some very similar sensibilities, and then we came up with this idea together, Blair Witch, and then when it came down to actually directing, once Greg Hale got involved, Rob Cowie, all the producers kind of we started kind of coming up with a plan. We figured that, we had two parts of the movie. We had phase one and phase two. Phase one was all the stuff that you're seeing here in the woods. Phase two was all the documentary stuff. And just kind of, I don't know why we chose it this way, but I was the lead director on the footage part on this stuff, and then Dan was the lead director on the documentary. And really, it just meant that, we ran everything by each other, but it was kind of like one person was kind of, in charge of moving things forward, and it kind of worked for us because, while I was kind of concentrating on one thing, the directing notes, Dan could be doing something else and bringing intel to us and saying, hey, I think we should do this, whatever. So it worked out really well. And then once we got to Orlando, he kind of took over the phase two side of things. And even though, I worked on it as much as he did, he definitely was, calling the shots and, taking charge of that kind of stuff with, input from me. But so it worked out really well. I mean, I don't know if I could have done, it's hard co-directing, it's always difficult, but this made it a lot easier because we were able to kind of have part one and part two, and then kind of give each other's, be supportive while the one, was doing the primary directing functions, but again, it was, the movie was really co-directed by me and Greg and Dan, and also Greg Hale, I think. I love this scene, with Mike's chest hair scene.
I don't see it pure gray in there. I do not see
Yeah.
South Africa.
But it was very much a collaborative effort. Even Ben Rock, was the production designer. Rick Marino was the art director. Like, and obviously the actors. Like, it was all very much, we were all kind of directing this thing together because we had to, because it was just, there wasn't me and behind a camera and actors in front of the camera. It was literally the film was going on, in real time in the woods with very little supervision. So I think we all did a little bit of directing during those 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, that leads me into like a question I have is, you talk about it in the original commentary that the bickering had already started the night when they were in the motel and all that, and you had to cut out a lot of stuff because it was getting a little too adversarial, a little too early. It's the perfect balance in this version, the final version, where they're teasing like, okay, don't get us lost, but you can kind of feel like the undercurrent that they're getting a little ticked off. Like, and working on student films that did go into the woods, not to have to camp, but like, the person be like, oh, don't worry, we have to go this way, and then we carry all this heavy equipment. It's like, I could see, you're still friendly, but you're getting a little pissed off. I know originally there was supposed to be and Heather were supposed to be former lovers, and that was supposed to be an interesting dynamic, and Mike was supposed to be the one to be originally taken out, but you had to cut all that out. Was there any moment when you were on like looking at the dailies and dealing with this as it was being shot that you're like, oh, we're changing this on the fly because their dynamic is a lot different than we pictured it? Or were you totally like, you know what, fine, they're not lovers, they're arguing a little bit more, but this still works?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lovers thing, was the kibosh was put on that pretty early, by both. I think both Heather and Josh were like, no, we don't, I don't think we should go there. And really for us, um, like when we cast the movie, it was like the three best people that kind of, that felt different, like Mike and Josh, very different dudes, Heather, very strong leader. And, and for us, it was just basically like the best actors in that combination. So, and we always felt like, look, if, you guys are going to be stuck in the woods for a week. If there is going to be romance, if there is something, then let's use it. But it's completely up to you guys. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to force you guys to have like a sex scene or something. I mean, that's just not, it was not going to happen.
Yeah.
And like a lot of it, like we just kind of let them, we gave them the background for their characters and what they had to do, because they were all from Maryland. They had all gone to school together. So we kind of filled in those gaps, but the rest of it, we were all pushing, we were all pulling from their, as much of their past as they wanted to bring into the story. That kind of, we kind of left it up to them to see how far they wanted to go with it. And then the removing Mike, the removing Josh instead of Mike, the sound guy, which was Mike, was always the one that was supposed to leave, and Heather, Heather and Josh, the cameraman and the film and the director were the ones that were supposed to get together. But as we watched the footage, Heather and Josh were really just at each other's throats so much. There was just a lot of, they were just really two really strong characters, and they were all kind of bashed. They were just bashing their heads all the time. And then even though Mike got into fights and stuff, it felt like Mike, it felt like there's more, there was more layers there. And we just felt like if we leave Josh and Heather together, what are we going to see? Is it just going to be more shouting? And, it just didn't feel right. So Dan and I were like, maybe we should take, Josh out. And then in the editing room, once we took Josh out, there was a kind of a cool little thing between Mike and Heather developed. There was like a little, there was like a more camaraderie, and we felt that it was a good little combination between them. And it's almost like a calm, when Josh left, especially in the original footage. And then, but basically, what Dan and I went back and we said, well, I mean, we liked the fighting, but it would be interesting if we had Mike be more, do more of the fighting and more of the yelling and more of the confrontation with Heather, and cut all the Josh confrontations out until the very, until the end, when they're all kind of fighting. So Dan and I kind of went through and basically cut out all the stuff, that made Josh and Heather kind of the fighting. And we kept all the Mike stuff, all the arguing about the map and all this stuff. And because, we still wanted there to be turmoil. We still wanted there to be conflict. We just didn't want there to be as much as Josh and Heather were giving us, at that point. And it was like, I mean, I think Heather was being really dominant. And, she was a director, and, it was like, I understand why she took that, that character trait and like really ran with it. But, we had to tell her to tone it down a little bit. We told her, look, these guys are doing you a favor. you're not paying them. These guys are just guys you went to school with. You don't even know Mike. Josh, a little bit, but you don't know Mike. And it's like, you have to be cool because these people they're bringing you this equipment. And they could just leave in the morning if, they're not, they have no reason to be here. So you have to give them a reason to be here. You have to be the kind of leader that, inspires them and busts their balls, but also inspires them and makes them believe, in your vision. So, I think it worked out in the end, but you're always going to have, bits of conflict like that between actors and characters and stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, and you do a good job cutting out because obviously we do see Heather and Josh fighting, especially when it gets to the map back and forth. But you're watching the cut without knowing anything about it. You wouldn't know that they had the more adversarial relationship when most of the filming was being done. And you still have the famous fire scene that we just passed, where they're doing the Gilligan's Island jokes and all that. It's like, it still feels like they're getting along. Yeah, they can be pissed off at each other, but this is now when they're starting to get like really fucked with. Initially
yeah,
they're just
and this
mad,
was the
like,
night. Like this was after this night, and this is when we went back and watched the footage of this night. Um, there was an issue, especially this scene right here where she's kind of yelling at Mike. I mean, because it went on for a while. Like, Heather was just being really difficult. And then in the morning, um, I guess right before they shot this, Mike and I think both Mike and Josh wanted to. They left word in one of because obviously that we weren't there. Dan and I were not there, so they left word with Ben, who was Ben Rock was. We were all kind of in charge of keeping their supplies going, which meant tapes and batteries and also food, whatever they needed to exchange. We would grab the old tapes from the used tapes from them and used batteries. And they told Ben, hey, we need to see Dan or Ed. We just need to talk to them real quick. So I went down and met with them, and they were just kind of like, we want to kill this woman. She's just being really aggressive. And so I put, I was like, I agree with you. I've seen the footage, whatever. So I went, I took Heather and I said, look, you need to, like I told like this, like kind of the pep talk, like we need to have, we can't start at 10, level 10 already, we have to kind of build up. So if you are having frustrations with them, just keep them simmering until the end. And then we can, you can kind of build up and, but right now you have to be kind of nicer to these guys. It's just, character wise, it just makes sense, or else they're going to walk out of the woods, with your film, but but it was a difficult, and then this day was really difficult. This was like rain, and this was like the hardest day of the shoot. They got ahead of us, and ended up breaking scenario and finding a house that was nearby the woods, and calling us on the phone and saying, where the hell are you guys? We lost radio contact with them. So this was the worst day for production for sure. It just rained. They were moving much faster than we needed them to move, and then the rain just kind of made everything wet and very difficult. We were also moving base camps at the time, so this was the only time where I think the production kind of lost track of the actors and like really dropped the ball at this point.
Yeah, and I remember I saw like the actors did like a convention appearance, and they talked specifically about this day and how they were starting to get annoyed of them having to set up the tents themselves every day, and that was a big issue. Was when they got to their camp this day, you'd already set it up, and the tent was like partially flooded. That they were now getting like upset. It's like, okay, do we really need to get footage of us filming setting up the tent every day? And they wanted to just get out of the rain. So I could imagine getting yelled at and then being cold. They're starting to be like, okay, how many more days are we doing in the woods, guys?
Yeah, and this exactly, and again, like they were, they're dedicated actors, but they're also human beings, and it was not a good day for anybody.
I have a question too. This is a little more practical one, but how did you guys raise money for the movie?
Um, we, I mean, we tried to do kind of like get the rich people in our in our circle and to give us money, and we did like a like a 10-minute video kind of explaining what the, like a pitch video explaining what this movie was and what the footage was and all that stuff. Um, but we didn't really have much success. It's just, it's very difficult raising money for a movie. And we were only looking for like, 15, $20,000. Um, what the biggest chunk of money that we got was, we were part of a show called Split Screen that aired on Bravo back in the late '90s, and we got the investor tape to John Pearson, who ran the show, and he loved it, and he actually aired the investor reel in on his show, and he paid us some money for that, and then he paid us up front for another episode because we were about to shoot the movie, and really that money is really what is the majority of the money that we used to shoot the phase one part of the movie. And then we got little chunks here and there, and a lot of credit card, put a lot of stuff on credit cards. And then once we had this and we were editing it and people started seeing the footage, I think we had a little more luck as far as raising, little bits here and there. But mostly it was, a lot of family members putting money in. And then again, John Pearson kind of saved our asses for sure.
Okay, and then once Artisan picked the movie up, they threw you guys some more money too for reshoots, I think, or is that correct?
They bought the movie and then they felt the ending was, needed some work. And so they went, they hired, they paid us to shoot some alternate endings, which were terrible.
Yeah.
But it was nice because we were, they actually paid us, and we were actually at the house at the end, with actually being paid was kind of cool. Being actually paid to make films was kind of cool. And then that's when we went back and redid some stuff, so a couple of interviews with townspeople in the in Burkittsville, where Blair, because we wanted to add some kind of more depth to the Rustin Parr murders, to like what happens at the very end. And then Artisan, luckily, they redid the sound mix. They started spending some real money on it, and eventually, they let us go with our ending, and and they were cool with it. I mean, Artisan really was we really found the best partner as far as studios were concerned for Blair Witch, for sure. And the marketing they did, and the fact that they let us go with our original ending, and they never, they really did let us have our director's cut, which was pretty amazing. And so it was, again, the kind of the planets aligned and found us the right distributor to take the chance on us. But yeah, we redid the ending, and then we redid a couple of interviews in Burkittsville.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and yeah, that's interesting because, and we'll get to obviously when we get to the ending, but yeah, I've seen those alternate endings, and while a little unsettling, I mean, you can't top like what's there. I mean, that is obviously one of the most iconic shots of not just the movie, but like horror history. And I don't know how many times I've seen that referenced, or people even just like, if someone stands in the corner, it's like, well, what's this Blair Witch shit going on? Get out of the corner.
Yeah, it was crazy, man, because like we came up with that ending, like, really kind of, again, we got really lucky. We didn't know how we were going to end the movie, and we came up with this idea, and it worked so well that we really loved it. The more we looked at the movie, the more we saw the movie, the more we loved the ending. So we were really relieved when they let us keep it.
Yeah. So, well, and now we're getting into they're now in the woods longer than they should be, and this is when, at least for me, it's always turned into becoming really adversarial with all three of them, where Heather's like, I don't care that you guys want to leave now, I have to document this really weird shit. And they're like, we don't care if it's rednecks, we don't care if it's witches or what, let's get the hell out of here. This clearly is not something we should be like sitting around doing.
And this was for us, like, okay, now there's proper conflict, like now, Heather's main issue is, main goal is to get this movie made, and now these guys are now in direct conflict. They actually want to leave the woods, And for Mike and Josh, their motivation is pretty simple. They want to get the hell out of the woods and go back to work and go back to school or whatever. So here where it started working, where we were kind of like, all right, we took the brakes off and let them kind of get into it a lot, and then just we figured we would edit the we would kind of sculpt it in the edit.
Yeah. And also now we're getting to the famous map scene. So there's a question that I've always wondered that people have been a little cagey about. So it's been established you guys would communicate with them. You're usually leaving notes in film cans, stuff like Heather wants to do this, you don't want to do it, and that would inform them where they wanted to go. So from the interpretation and what Mike has said, it sounds like he physically did kick the map in the creek, and you even say in the commentary that he was like worried they were going to catch him doing it. So was this a matter of just like, okay, guys, you all like give us the map, and then Heather's note said Josh accuses you of having it, Josh has it, and vice versa for Josh, and then Mike's was, you have the map, get rid of it, don't let them know until the time is right.
No, I mean that's one of the things that was completely that Mike kept to himself.
Okay.
At least that's the way I remember. I don't remember him reaching out to us about the map, because like honestly, man, when we saw that scene, that was the first time we had seen that. Just like everybody else, because that was one of the weird things about Blair Witch was that when we would come home and watch the footage, normally when you shoot a movie or you shoot a TV show, you're there, so the footage. Like I rarely have to watch footage from my TV shows because I'm there. I know the footage. I know every once in a while I have to go back and look at a shot. But this was like literally, somebody else was shooting the movie for us. So when we would watch we watch the dailies as much as possible, during our breaks. We would basically, we saw that scene and our jaws dropped. We were like, holy crap. Like for us, it was like we were watching a real movie. You know what I mean? Okay. And then I think that was the moment where we realized, yeah, maybe this is something, this might be something, because we were never sure about what the hell we were doing. So yeah, I mean, the way I remember it was that Mike kicked the map into the creek, and I think we actually have it on video, but nobody, because we went back and looked at it, we're like, holy shit, I think you can actually see him kick it into the river like the day before. So, and he just decided, hey, I think I'm gonna say it right now, and it was the perfect time. You know what I mean? But all this stuff is just is all them. You know what I mean? It's mostly Mike just kind of keeping this secret and realizing that he it's kind of it's a ticking time bomb, and just depends on when he's going to release the bomb, and he released it at the right moment. And Mike and Heather were like so surprised by it that their initial reaction was pretty much as violent as they get the whole between each other the whole movie. So obviously it was a very strong reaction, but again, this was totally Mike's doing. Mike right now, he's like, okay, when am I gonna drop this bombshell on these two? And then in the edit, we realized what was going to happen. So there was that scene that just happened where like they're talking about the map, and just wanted to kind of lay in little things about like Mike talking about the map and this and that, just to kind of, just to set up this scene that is about to happen right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and no, it's very effective. And I know, a lot of people have made fun of the scene where it's like, oh, they fight about the map so long, but I mean, it's perfect because as Heather gets into eventually when like they're then arguing about, okay, well, I need the compass, and she like becomes like a child. It's like, well, no, this is my compass. You should have brought one. It really shows that's like they're all like young 20-something-year-old film students now way out of their depth, and it's just perfect that it's like whether the witch is screwing with them and the map was useless or not, it's just the boiling over point now.
Yeah, and and to me, like, I mean, like if back in the day before smartphones and stuff, before GPS, I mean, if you're stuck in the woods, if you lose the map, man, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell. So for us, it was like, even though, the map it wasn't really going to do any good because they were already, they were stuck in this, Blair Witch bubble, this supernatural bubble. The map was the hope. You know what I mean? The map was the hope, the connection to civilization and to like, okay, this is the road to get the hell out of here. And I think this is, the culmination of like just the kind of the realization of like the map is gone, and this dude, kicked it in the, so it's not a, especially Josh, it's like, okay, now not only is Heather, you know, against me, now Mike has done this knucklehead thing, and so it was just really interesting, I'm pretty sure that we found out about this as we watched the footage for the first time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it works out perfectly also because until you get to the scene when they've been walking around south all day and then end up at the same campsite, it could be argued there's really no definitive supernatural. This could be one of the two fishermen just screwing with them in the woods and all that. So it also works from a level of now they're completely lost, and some of it does is able to obscure is there really the witch? So could it be potentially okay? Yeah, they're just idiots and they don't know how to follow a compass.
Yeah,
All
yeah. I mean,
that.
yeah. At this point, you're absolutely like, because nothing really supernatural has happened other than nothing, and really nothing supernatural really happens in the whole movie. I mean, it all can be kind of attributed to something else. But the idea that like they're holding on to this, they're lost in the woods. I mean, everybody's been lost in the woods one way or another. I got lost when I was scouting this movie, and especially when the sun starts going down, it's freaking creepy, and it's like I got to get the hell out of here. So, this all just worked. It felt really natural to us, and Dan and I kind of let things happen here, and there was a lot of silence. Um, and but they kept pushing each other's buttons. Heather was still determined here, like let's get that. She's still trying to be the leader. You know what I mean? And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, and that's the thing. Heather is often maligned. People usually, when they criticize the movie, is be like, "Oh, she's so bitchy" and all that. And it's like, and she can be, but it's like we just pass by where she's like really losing control. And you could hear it like in her voice, where it's like she's like, "Okay, I don't know what I'm doing now," but like is still desperately trying to be like, "This is my thing. I'm not responsible for these
Yeah,
two."
yeah, and also, man, I mean, look, there's always weird things. There's always, peculiar kind of circumstances when a woman is in charge of men. You know what I mean? Because it's like, men have been dominating for so long. Um, and this took, we shot this in 1996, right? 1996, 97, 97. So, this is before Me Too. This was still, there was a lot more male filmmakers than there were female filmmakers, especially film students. So for me, Heather's, one of the things that we kind of, loved about Heather's just natural personality is that she was, she didn't take any crap, and we just felt like we needed a director that was like assertive and knew what she wanted. And I think that the word bitchy comes across, and unfortunately I've used it also, but I think that sometimes bitchy is misconstrued as like in a man it wouldn't be called bitchy, it would be called, oh, he's being strong and he's being a leader. um but yeah, I think there's certain parts where she takes it a little too far. But again, it's like there's a lot of things going on, and that's one of the things we loved about it, because we always felt that the director was going to be a woman. We always had that idea from the very beginning. um and we luckily cast it perfectly.
Yeah, she was really great. And I mean, all three of them were great. But I mean, she like yeah, I mean, you've said in the commentary left she or some interview maybe. I've listened to a lot of interviews with you late this week preparing, so they're all blurring together. But like that, her some of her acting was Oscar worthy, and it's like when she like really gets into it, it's a really damn good performance.
Oh, it's a great performance, man. And like, you know I always say, like you say, I always say it that, I put up Heather's performance up against anybody in a horror movie or anybody, in a conventional movie. It's just, I think um, it was a shame she didn't get as much accolades that I think that she deserved. And honestly, I mean, I know that we were never going to be nominated for an Oscar, but any of the actresses that were nominated that year for an Oscar, I would put Heather right up there, and she would be competing with them, because I don't know anybody else that has done anything like this still to this
Yeah.
day. I mean, you can compare like maybe Charlize Theron with Monster, and maybe Natalie Portman with Black Swan, but like to get in the woods and like this level of like physical degradation to a certain point, like physical kind of conflict of just being in the woods with two dudes, um, not showering, and just all of them went through that, but her being the main character and the leader, it really would have fallen apart very quickly if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
I think there's a reason why that shot is so iconic of her with the camera against her like that. I think given the circumstances and just sort of the alchemy of filmmaking, with how it's photographed. But I think it's that performance is what sucks you in.
Oh yeah, and it sucked us in when we first watched it too. I mean, it was again another one of those moments where our jaws were on the floor and just like completely, completely taken by our own footage.
And that's when you knew you thought you had something there when you saw it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we felt like we had something special. We had no idea. You know, Obviously, we never dreamed that it was going to be what it became, but we were always, at that point, we were like, okay, somebody's going to like this movie. It
Mm-hmm.
might not do, it might just be a straight to video or something, because that's really all we were counting on, is a straight to video movie. Honestly, we never, just judging by the way we shot it, we had no. It was just basically as shaky as they wanted it to be. Even though sometimes we did tell, like early on, we told Heather like zoom out while you're walking and only zoom in when you're like have a steady shot. Um, we never had plans that this was going to be in the movie theater, so that's why a lot of people ended up getting sick. That was completely unintentional.
Yeah. Um, and then we just also just were passing by the infamous "What the fuck is that" scene.
Yeah.
And I've heard the description, that it was supposed to be a guy in white like long johns and wrapped in gauze, but unfortunately, with Josh running, the 16 millimeter just kept, the film kept jumping off the track, so you never were able to see it in a usable take. When Artisan gave you money to go back and shoot some stuff, was there a temptation to, okay, let's go back and try and get that shot again, or did you at that point be like, it's better without it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like if we had gone down if we had continued down the documentary road, because this scene was supposed to be something that we were going to examine like frame by frame in the documentary. And what Dan and I were looking for was just for a few frames where, the documentarian would like actually still the image, and you would see like this weird white, human figure in the woods. But once we kind of went down the road of, especially after Sundance, once, when Artisan gave us money, we never thought of going back. We were like, we don't need it. It was kind of an artifact from an earlier version. It wasn't, I mean, it would have been cool to get, and actually like I don't know how we didn't get it, because like Dan and I went, after they were all done with their shot, Dan and Neil was the DP. We went off and with Dave, who was playing the guy in the, white long johns, we actually went and like shot, her point of view again with him at like various distances. And we were like, okay, he's 10 feet away. He's got this got to reflect on, it's got to be being, it's got to be captured on the film. But obviously we were dealing with 16 millimeter film, and we didn't have, we weren't really developing this footage, every day. We couldn't afford to do that. So by the time the dailies came back from that night, we were like, holy crap, none of that guy came up, none of Dave and his long johns. was exposed. So, we were really disappointed. And I think if we, like I said, we wanted to go back and like, I don't know if we would have digitally put something in or whatever, but we definitely wanted to have that moment in the documentary where there was footage where they would look and say, oh my God, look, there's something there that they didn't see, or there's, we definitely wanted to fill the documentary with those kinds of moments. But then once we went the other way, those moments kind of died, and we didn't need them anymore. So we
Yeah,
discarded them.
yeah, because I think that, I mean, that would have been cool, and I had never heard that version where you said that was supposed to be for the documentary side of it. But I think what makes this, and it's like what we said, not really anything supernatural definitively happens, and that makes, again, goes into making this a lot more realistic. Lesser found footage movies. It's like, well, this is definitive proof ghosts are real. This is definitive proof. Like in Paranormal Activity, it ends with the demon drop face lunging at the camera, and all that. And I feel like that isn't nearly as scary because you're like, what is this? And and again, it's the scariest thing is in your imagination. So I like heard there were people like when this came out were like, wait, is it a giant stick man? Like they themselves were trying to analyze the footage to like see what was there.
Yeah, and that's kind of, we love that. I mean, that was like, you know what we used to do as kids. Or even in film school, you analyze movies sometimes scene by scene, shot by shot. And we love the idea, especially in the documentary, of putting things in there that were just completely unexplained. You know what I mean? And also, I love the idea that like of what we love the idea of like watching footage of something happening, and then we were going to go back in the documentary and say, well, the stickman is actually this, and it means that they're cursed. And so it's almost like the audience was going to know stuff that Josh, Heather, and Mike did not know about where they were, and it was going to make kind of more of a dreadful kind of like, oh my God, I can't. They don't know what they're getting into, and this. But in the end, obviously, it didn't work. But it was, we still had all these ideas that we were just going to use the footage for, but eventually those ideas kind of went out the window once we decided to jettison the documentary idea.
Yeah, so now we're getting ready. This is one of Josh's last days and all that, and it you had in there where all of his shit was thrown around, and then the reference to coming up that Heather stole the stick men, and then he had knocked something over. So you're getting into reasons why Josh was being taken out, and
like Josh was being targeted, and those are things that we found. Like a lot of those things, like him kicking the rock pile over, that was just something that happened before we decided that Josh was going to be the one that had to leave. But once in the edit, you have prior knowledge of where you're headed, and you're like, hey, that's cool. He kicked that rock pile over. Let's put it in there and make that part of the reason, maybe why he's being, targeted. But yeah, it was just basically Dan and I wanting to get rid of Josh before Mike, And then this scene here is like, really cool because this is one of the earliest scenes that Dan and I came up with during the writing, which is the idea that like they walk straight, all day and they end up in the same place. You know what I mean? And this is when obviously you realize that they're fucked.
Yeah. Well, and from the same interview with the trio of actors, they made it sound like you guys had given them an early GPS where it's like don't show this on camera, but this is like where you need to go. This is where we'll meet you and all that. So it sounded like not even they were aware that they had been hiking for a day to just end up back. That you made it slight enough turns. So is that really the case? Was that truly their reactions? They had zero idea that they were going to come back to the same place again, and were really that upset.
I don't know. I don't quite remember. I mean, I think that, I don't quite remember exactly how that happened, but whether they knew. But I know that at certain points, and it might have been this day, we had them kind of zigzagging all over the place, and they figured out that we were zigzagging them, and they kind of like just, they were pretty smart people, so they kind of just kind of realize, okay, we don't have to be here until 2 o'clock, so let's just hang out, or whatever, and then at 2 o'clock we'll head over there. Because they were tired. They were tired of walking, also. But yeah, the GPS really worked out, and that was a system that Greg Hale, our producer, came up with. And these were old GPS units, man, where like they had uh, an inherent like error in the because it was, it was developed by the military, so the military didn't want civilians having like pinpoint accuracy, so it was like 100 feet of accuracy or something, so or 50 feet. So you kind of had to be you had to kind of set up almost a marker or make sure there was a tree that was recognizable, because you couldn't go like sometimes you would go to one place and it would have one number, and then you go the next day to the same place and it would have a little slightly different number because there was like that error built in from the satellite signal. And I guess they got rid of that eventually, for the newer GPSs. But you know, they were juggling all that too, man. Mostly Heather, because we would put the GPS coordinates into the GPS, and then we would save them as certain things. So we would go, all right, head to waypoint 2. You need to be at waypoint 2 by around 3 o'clock. And then so there was like logistical information for Heather, and then the rest of it was like character information. But she was leading that, and then I think it got to the point where Mike ended up leading, or I'm not sure what, near the end. But so yeah, there's a lot more stuff than just the acting. And this scene is, again, one of those, like, how deep do they all go here, man? That you hear in the voices how deep they are, how like committed to this they are, and like they're so convincing, especially her and Josh. And again, this is one of those scenes that like I think could have gotten would have gotten in a mainstream movie. I think this would have gotten a lot more attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and you inadvertently were copying Spielberg actually, I think, the same year because you said even though this was supposed to be a much smaller element of the documentary, you want it to be real. You wanted them to be tired, and that's what Spielberg did with Saving Private Ryan, putting all the actors through boot camp, because you could tell an actor, yeah, you've been hiking in the woods for 5 days and you haven't been eating that well, but if you put them in a motel down the road and they slept in a nice soft bed and were eating the continental breakfast before they went back out, you can't be nearly as realistic. So it works out very well with how like you could tell how frazzled they are. You mentioned like on the commentary, like Josh had to have a like neck warmer because he was like breaking out into like hives because of how cold he was, and it's like you could tell how miserable they are, and that really then plays into like how frazzled they're getting. I mean, it's very powerful how she's acting.
Especially this scene where like it's the first, obviously right before Josh disappears, Josh's last scene. So we want a little moment with him, but also you realize they're in a freaking little like 6x6 tent or whatever. Like they're literally in a little room together, sleeping together. And they didn't know each other before this. You know what I mean? Like they just met a week before this. So yeah, it's and how uncomfortable sleeping in the woods is in a sleeping bag. No matter how good the tent is, you're still sleeping on the ground. So I definitely think you can that this was that they were just being worn down. And it was so cool because we told them we were going to do this to them, and they let us do it to them.
Yeah, famously, the Backstage magazine ad they've said was, "We care about your safety, not your comfort." So,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, exactly.
a pretty ominous thing, but yeah, they all knew what they were getting into.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And they especially Heather, who was like, most of the crew was men, and the two actors were men, and she was this kind of lone woman with all these people that she had to completely trust, with her life, really. So
Yeah, I heard she actually brought a hunting knife with her just in case because she was a little paranoid. Like, okay,
yeah,
is this really a snuff film? Like, is this all a like ruse to get me into the woods?
yeah. No, I mean it was absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Well, you said you had a DP for this movie. How did that work with this kind of movie?
He was, Neil Fredericks. He passed like 10 years ago, or a little, hell, now it's like what, 15, 14, 15 years ago. He was a really good friend of mine, of ours, from Montgomery College, the school that I went to, the community college that I went to, and then he came with me to UCF. He didn't go to UCF, but he already had a film degree, so he came up and just kind of, we were roommates, and he got to know Dan and all the other guys that were involved in the movie. And so when it came time to DP, he had a CP16. So we're like, hey, we'll rent your CP16. We'll give you a little bit of money, and then you can come and, DP. And, he was a little, definitely kind of not frustrated, but he was a little kind of confused about, okay, what am I supposed to do here? But really, I mean, we knew that the filmmakers were going to do all the camera work. There's a couple of things that, that he did. Like some of the reshoots, obviously, and then also the the scene at the end in the house. We had to do some reshoots there. We had to come back the next day. But basically, he was coordinating all the the visuals, making sure the cameras were loaded properly, making sure the actors knew how to operate the cameras. He ran Mike and Josh through like a little mini film school, just trying to make sure that they knew what they were doing. And then he was just there, making sure the footage was fine and making sure the cameras were charged and that they were working. And then that night when the CP16, broke, he was the one, fixing it. So it was like, it probably wasn't much of an artistically satisfying movie for him, because it was mostly just kind of keeping up with them, kind of the logistics of shooting the movie. But again, he was, he kind of, like all of us did, we backed away and like let the movie happen. You know what I mean? Because this movie wasn't directed in a conventional way. It wasn't DP'd in a conventional way. It wasn't acted in a conventional way. So, he just kind of, our jobs mostly, and I learned this a lot from Blair Witch, is the idea that like sometimes the best directing you can do is just to step away and let things happen, Mm-hmm. And I think, this was the approach with everything in this movie, is just let the actors do what they got to do, and, give them a safe space, enough space where they feel like the fear, but they don't really feel like they're going, their lives are in danger. And just kind of create this bubble around it, and then let them see let's see what they can do. And the same thing with Neil. Neil kind of just trained the actors, and then kind of we give them tips, like again the zooming out. When you're moving, make sure the camera is in the widest position, and just kind of taking light meter readings with Josh and focus, and just goes back, shooting with a 16mm camera is a lot more challenging than shooting with a video camera. So, but yeah, he was just kind of like all of us, kind of set up what you need to set up, and then back away and let the magic happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, often the movies often maligned. People say you can't see anything and it's out of focus. But it's, again, it goes into the realism of it. And back to the beginning when they were shooting the Mary Brown scene, and Josh screwed up and measured for meters instead of our system, as Heather calls it. It works out well, because again, that is a mistake. Being in film school, I know we didn't work with that specific camera, but we worked with 16mm, and plenty of kids I know made that same mistake. So
yeah,
even when the teaching didn't work out well, I think it's still a very nice looking movie. Yeah, there's obviously scenes like this where it's blackness, but like when they're shooting some of the B-roll footage that you see of like the woods, and then like the whole last scene in the house, it's like that's like really well shot.
Yeah. No, I mean it was like, we didn't do anything to like make the movie beautiful. Like basically the realism was, like here the lens is fogged up. You know what I mean? Like that's just early morning, basic, the lens gets fogged up, so everything came from just the natural order of what was happening. You know what I mean? and again, like even that scene when Mary Brown, when she's out of focus, like a lot of we were so when we first saw it, we're like, oh man, it sucks and this and that, but to me it like adds a weird kind of ghostly element to her, like where she's not in focus. It's just a weird, you don't see a documentary with somebody in focus. You never see that. Like it's a mistake, but it's all the footage they had. So, but it kind of gives, to me, it like adds to like the mystique of Mary Brown. You know what I mean? Like obviously it was a mistake that Josh made, but it's almost like this thing where like you can't. She's out of focus for some reason. You know what I mean? There's something else there, and it just gave it a different kind of feel that I really learned to like appreciate.
Yeah, and if any of the other interviewers were out of focus, it wouldn't have worked nearly as well. And you guys like said like how peculiar she was. Heather, Josh, and Mike in their interviews have said how quirky she was, and like she gives off the story like everyone else is telling the story of oh, this is what my grandmother told me. Like you don't really get the feeling that everyone else believes it, but it's like you feel she believes this. This is she's the only one really who had an actual encounter with the Blair Witch.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And and we that was the big thing for us is casting her. Is like we were so happy. We were so lucky to find Patricia because she was very, she was a very unique woman. She had a very unique energy, and the fact that she was, she was cool with doing this. Like she was totally into it. She was the only intern that came from MC to help us. Like she helped in the house. There's pictures of her helping in the Rustin Parr house, like paint the graffiti out and stuff. So she had this spirit and this energy that we were finding a hard time casting. We were having a hard time casting Mary Brown, because we want, it had to be a certain age woman, and we wanted it to be, there's something unique about her, something. And then Patricia came up, and it was like, wow, that was again serendipity. Yeah. Here's the infamous Josh, the only real blood in the movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you said in the commentary that it's because of like how she zoomed in, you don't really get a scale for it. So you had some pretty interesting theories, people giving theories like, oh, is that as you refer, like, is it his manhood? Is it some internal organs? But it was just bloody teeth, which were real teeth you got from a dentist.
It was bloody teeth, and then some of his hair.
Yeah,
and it was wrapped in a section of his shirt that he was wearing the day before, and again, the serendipity of like just letting the actors do what they need to do and make mistakes, and that she never really got a great shot of it. So you're kind of you're left with this like, okay, it looks like teeth, but it also looks like a tongue. It could be an ear. There looks like it's something fleshy in there. But for us, it doesn't matter what it is. It's just that's what it is. That makes it even better. When you don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, and again, less is more. In my opinion, a lot of people's opinion. That's if she came out and Josh's head was like on the stone, like, and it was a really bad effect.
Yeah,
like,
that would have been a little different.
It's over the top and not needed. Like that's like genuinely, because you're like, what is that? You're wondering again, is it like with the when she's like yelling, what the fuck is that? People were like trying to put what their own theory is, and that makes it a hell of a lot scarier, to me at least, and I'm assuming a lot of other people. But yeah, you even mentioned though initially I guess Heather was just like so dumb with finding stuff that she didn't actually open the bundle initially. You had to be like, no, go back and open it. Yeah, so I mean, like Mike, like this look on Mike's face, like you can subscribe so much to it. I've had like a friend say, well, he clearly looks possessed now, and it's like, or he's just like exhausted beyond like all like like possible things that he could deal with, and he's losing his mind a little bit. He's mentioning like the Cal Ripken game right now, and like, they're just like so distraught. Like it's one of my favorite moments is when they're deciding which way to go, and they're like, all right, should we go east or west? Well, it's Wicked Witch of the East, Wicked Witch of the West. Which one? Which one's the bad one? Which one
Yeah.
should we? Like it's just like it's. You can see like at that point, it's like they're just so hopelessly screwed. They're just like trying to like, what possible thing could we do now?
Yeah, and it was a cool um it was a cool like time like I really love this part of the movie where it's kind of like there is kind of like a peace because I think they both know they're screwed and it's the precursor to this scene,
Yeah, yeah,
like that whole day, because they were basically alone the whole day, and we picked them up at later in the day, and we drove them to the house location because the house was a different location than the rest of the woods, and we didn't show them the house. We just drove them to like this. We walked them to this area of the woods, like probably about 100 yards from the house, and the tent was already set up, and then this is where all this happened. So this is the first scene that was in a different location,
yeah,
and so Dan and I played around with that day. Okay, what's this day look like? The day without Josh, and they're all they were just exhausted. Hadn't been eating a lot, and I think it shows in the way they look, Mike's look especially. And then we mixed kind of those black and white, kind of the sun going down shots of like, okay, here it comes again, this beautiful shot of the sunset, but what's coming.
yeah.
And then this, of course, is you know this
I mean,
is probably the most one of the most courageous bits of acting I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
yeah, and it goes to like when people like try and criticize the acting, it's like the fact that she is able to be crying out both eyes, producing all that, and then willingly have that put up. You said in the commentary like what her must have been in her mind when she saw that like on a giant movie screen. But again, it feels real, and Heather's said she wishes sometimes she didn't wear nearly as much padding and all that, and not make herself look traditionally beautiful as she said, to help get acting gigs. But I mean, it feels really goddamn real when you're watching this, that like this woman is having a nervous breakdown and is we're seeing about to die evidently, but like it's just at her like snapping point. The facade of her being I'm in charge, I know what I'm doing is 100% gone. She's like a child now.
Yes. Yeah. 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 No, it's just really interesting, man. And we had a scene, Mike did like a confessional because we gave them almost the same note where it's like, we gave Heather, we're like, walk away, go somewhere a little, close to the tent, but a little where Mike's not going to hear you, and just kind of, this is it. You're done. This is your last will, testament, basically. And we gave the same direction to Mike, and he did one in the tent after her, and it was really good, but you couldn't have both. You couldn't have two of them, especially after Heather's. Like Heather's just kind of like that's the scene that kind of grounds the whole theme of the film. Like her addiction to this, her dedication to this film has led them into this terrible situation. Um,
Yeah.
and then we had to let them go to sleep, and then we woke them up with Josh yelling from the woods, which was just a boom box with a cassette of Josh yelling in it. Josh was already in New York at this point. He was back home. But when they first see this house, that's the first time they saw the house. Um, and we tried to direct, because the directing notes were always a challenge because you had to direct people, you had to direct the actors and give them like distinct, concrete notes. But at the same time, you wanted to keep things a little, mystical, a little, nebulous, because you didn't want them to, to know what was happening. And here we just basically put a bunch of wood against that door so they wouldn't go into that door. The only door we left open was the one that Mike went through. And then the directions on this day was like, for Mike, it was like, keep listening, keep following, listen to what the voice, I don't know if I said voice or not, but keep listening, the sounds will guide you. and it was something like you will go in and then you will go up and then you will end up down, and it's okay if you leave Heather, if you abandon Heather during this time. Um, so right now they are both trying to figure out what the hell are we supposed to do in here, and
Yeah.
we have another boom box upstairs in the attic, and basically at a certain point, I don't know if it was me. I think it was me with walkie talkies. I would be like, okay, let's do the upstairs voices, and then they would turn on the boom box, and that's what led them upstairs. And then we had another boom box in the cellar with Josh again yelling. And then after a little while upstairs, we turned that on, and then they ran down, and the rest is history. But this is all the original day. There's a certain point here where it turns into like the next day because we ran out of batteries for the film camera, for the light on the film camera. But this is all, this is all just them hearing and taking cues from our audio guy. There was somewhere up here hiding behind one of these walls.
Yeah.
And then Heather follows him slowly, and I thought that, this was the original idea, was always to have, the mic with the video camera and, with the audio, and then the 60 millimeter camera doesn't have audio. You have to, record audio on the side. And so obviously they've abandoned that recorder, and just having the audio just from Mike's point of view just really added a lot of like a creepy factor to it, to her footage. It's almost ghostly, like, somewhere around here is where we switched to the next day.
Yeah, I believe you said around here as well in the original
I think we
contract.
got this, and Mike, this is all original. But then I think once we go back to Heather, that's the next day.
Yeah, and I remember hearing Mike said when the first time you guys did it, he also hit like the off button on the camera, so like they had
Yeah,
lost the audio as well. But
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I mean, what can you say more about? I mean, it's obviously leading. It's we're about to have the most iconic shot of the movie, or one of the most iconic, and then of horror movies in general. And like, it's crazy how you said that you came up with this very close to the ending, because this feels like, especially when you had already written the Rustin Parr stuff with the kids in the corner, like that feels like that was like, I always assumed you had that in mind. This is how the movie's going to end: Mike in the corner, and then there you go.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was like, again, it was like we didn't know how we were going to end it, and it was more like, are we going to have a big, we didn't have any money, but Ben Rock, our production designer, was, he was, he knew what he was doing. He was very talented art director, and artist. So, and Greg the same way. Like, we were prepared to do like a real, like something cool there, like somebody coming out of the ground or somebody levitating or but every time we came up with an idea, we're like, oh, that's terrible, like, because how do you end this movie? How do you end the Blair Witch Project? And and luckily we came up with that ending, and then we kind of staged it at the last minute, and it worked. But it was again, it's one of these moments that you're like, you know things happen, and they don't you don't have any explanation for it, but it just seems like everything that happened, um, uh, that happened, that could happen right for a movie, happened with Blair Witch. You know what I mean? Like everything kind of lined up, and there was just a lot of good people willing to do work for free and to put in a lot of their time, and the collaboration between Dan and me and Greg and Heather, Josh and Mike and Ben and Rick, all the production people, the actors, directors, the producers. Like, it really was very much like it taught me that, like I said before, it taught me like a very valuable lesson about filmmaking, where it's about the community. You have to choose your community properly. Obviously, you have to cast the film properly. You have to make sure that your DP knows what they're doing, and is and he or she is connected with the style and with the sensibility of what you're trying to bring to the film. But a lot of it is just kind of, let's set all that stuff up, and then let the people do their job, because people will bring so many great ideas, especially in television for me. Like the people bring so many great ideas when you let them do their jobs, you know.
Yeah. So, well, and just we're now wrapping up. So, just want to again thank you, Eduardo, for coming on here with us. You know, this has made this commentary joy to do. And if you want to replace Jacob permanently, I think we could do that.
I doubt I could fill those shoes, man. I don't know. No, thanks for having me, man. It was fun. I haven't done this in a while, so it was good to chat about the movie while watching it.
So yeah, so stay tuned to our channel. Later in the month, we will be having an exclusive Q&A with Eduardo Sanchez about the legacy of the Blair Witch Project and so on. So thank you guys, and have a good night.
Thank you.
See ya.